As I'm diving further and further into the realm of politics, local and foreign, I find myself pretty confused about a lot of things. Thankfully, I love to read, and I hold mental growth and self-education in a very high value, so I'm getting there, but the progress is obviously slow. For this reason, as a checkpoint of sorts, I decided to do a test orchestrated by the Pew Research Center, called the Political Typology Quiz. It's sort of like the famous political compass test, but much shorter, and with less questions. I know, these tests aren't very accurate, the results usually make me laugh out loud, but since I love doing tests, I decided to do it anyway, and post both the questions, my answers, and my commentary on my answers here. This is what it says in the beginning. Are you a core conservative? A solid liberal? Or somewhere in between? Take our quiz to find out which one of our political typology groups is your best match compared with a nationally representative survey of more than 5,000 US adults by Pew Research Center. You may find some of these questions are difficult to answer. For example, you may partly agree with both statements, or feel that neither quite describes your view. That's okay. In those cases, pick the answer that comes closest to your view, even if it isn't exactly right. This has been the biggest problem with me doing these tests. Usually, I feel like I should add my own options, because the ones that are offered are usually quite shit, and very polarized. But, I think you already knew that. Let's begin. So, the test offers two options, and I get to pick the one I agree with more. 1. The government should do more to help needy Americans, even if it means going deeper into debt. 2. The government today can't afford to do much more to help the needy. I picked option number 2. Welfare system that throws around all the taxpayers' money is not just an unjust system, it enables the weak among us to live comfortably without doing anything to better either themselves, or their situation. For me, there are some exceptions though, like people suffering from different mental illnesses, but that's a whole another story. I live in Finland, and in here, people are fucking lazy. We have over 240,000 unemployed people living here, and that's only within the citizens of Finland. Imagine if you added immigrants into this, illegal and legal, imagine how big the number would be. Finland isn't that big of a country, you know. I know, some people aren't just unemployed because they're lazy, but since that sort of life is very easy to live here, I'd imagine that number being pretty high too. Finland is a full-blown welfare state, there's no way around that. Well, luckily that will all change, when we run out of money, and we will run out of money, because we are handing it over to the immigrants. Every penny going to an immigrant is a penny away from the Finnish people, and we don't happen to have any spare money lying around at the moment. In fact, Finland's economy is pretty much doomed because of these weird policies they've been pushing for the last decade or two. So, my answer is 2, take away the money from the rats, and use it to make a better functioning society. Second question. 1. Government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. 2. Government often does a better job than people give it credit for. As much as I'd like to say that I trust the government to do the right thing, I must admit that I don't. Hell, if I did, I wouldn't be writing this blog, since the point of this is to observe the fallen state of the modern Western world, and wake people up to reality. So, as for now, my answer is 1. Government is almost always wasteful and inefficient. Not much else to say about this. 1. The best way to ensure peace is through military strength. 2. Good diplomacy is the best way to ensure peace. Now, here is another hard one. As a Finnish man, I know the worth of good diplomacy. As we all know, Finland has been particularly good in negotiating its way around every trap that the world has set it up for. Now though, in the recent times, it seems that diplomacy alone isn't enough, not anymore, to make Europe rise from the ashes. I really think that the change will not come without force, although I can't say what kind of force we would need right and against who it would be. In a perfect society, I'd like to see a fine combination of both military force and diplomacy, because we won't survive as a nation if we neglect either. Finland as a country is rather small, and despite all the great war stories we're told about winning the Winter War against Russia, it's a sad fact that it wouldn't happen again. We simply lack the size and the resources to manifest that kind of force that would be needed to defeat a country as big as that anymore. So, while I think that both are essential in creating a strong nation, in the light of the recent times, I'll have to go with number 1, military strength. Next. 1. Racial discrimination is the main reason why many black people can't get ahead these days. 2. Blacks who can't get ahead in this country are mostly responsible for their own condition. Now, this is a fun one, given that the left is once again going nuts because of these racial issues facing the world right now. See, the left is actually the main source of racism and racial profiling, but because they use racial profiling against whites, and to put all the blacks into the same category of these teary-eyed and oppressed people still practically living in slavery, it's perfectly fine. It's utter madness, if you ask me, but hey, who am I to comment on that? I'm just a murderous fascist Nazi from Finland. Apparently. The black people in the US who actually believe that the far right, the police, their teachers, and basically everybody is after them because of their race and skin color, are mentally handicapping themselves into the worst possible position. The left is sawing the figurative legs off from the black people so they can't walk on their own. The left needs this perspective to stick, true or not, in order to get the right amount of votes in. People tend to meet facts with feelings, and to me, that's a battle that's lost in the beginning. So, my answer, as horrible as it is number 2. Blacks who can't get ahead in this country are mostly responsible for their own condition. Black people are just as responsible for their own happiness and success as the whites are, and it's high fucking time these people give the victim status a rest, and start actually focusing on bettering themselves, and making their own lives better. That way, they wouldn't even have to be dependent on government handouts, they could reclaim the strings of their life from the puppet masters, and start to actually live. Personal responsibility is a very powerful subject, and something that today's kids don't get enough education on. You do have the control to make everything better, and if you decide to just lie on the ground and scream, well, that's up to you. I don't really care either way, I just think you'd be more likely a happy person living a fulfilling life, and most importantly, I wouldn't have to hear your whining week after week, year after year. You are not a slave, you have never been a slave. Your parents were not slaves, and most probably your grandparents weren't either. So for the love of God, stop being a privileged twat, and open your eyes. Although it's a fact that blacks are more likely to live on government handouts than whites are in general, I'm aware that you can't pull that statistic out towards an individual, it's just a general statistic that blacks are more likely to do that. The thing that really angers me is all these fringe groups like Black Lives Matter and all the others, that try to paint all of the black people with the same brush. They are the ones that really promote racism, you know. But, you know, the whole organization was built upon a lie, so there's that. But let's move on with this thing, I will make sure to write a whole another post on these groups. 1. Government regulation of business is necessary to protect the public interest. 2. Government regulation of business usually does more harm than good. This is a fun one, and I must admit, that I know too little about this to really speak the truth, but I tell you what I know. My opinion on this is very divided, because while I really vote for as little government involvement as possible, on basically any given issue, regulations have done something good too, in the past. For example, a big example would be the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887, which was put to place because of the discriminatory pricing of the railroad tickets to both normal people and farmers to carry their products via train. The making of these railroads was also considered a common good for the nation, so obviously their making was highly regulated and paid by the government. The minus side to this would come in the form of government subsidies, which we can rightly call handouts at this point. Government had the power to support different businesses in the form of monetary support, and unfortunately the biggest part of this said money tended to end up in the hands of the biggest leading companies, thus killing the competition. We want government involvement so that there cannot be a monopoly, not to build one. Here are some more minuses to government regulations. Regulations tend to pile up hidden taxes on the market, thus raising the prices of the products. After all, Even the government doesn't work unpaid, which is understandable. Also, having too much involvement by the government dulls the competition between different businesses, which can obviously have many bad effects on the prices, on the quality of said products, and so on. This is also bad, because some small companies tend to live by the handouts that government keeps shooting their way, so that their businesses aren't overrun by their bigger and usually better opponents. They are sort of like the people living on government handout in welfare states such as Finland. Lastly, I will say that government regulations are rarely subject to thorough cost-benefit analysis, and the burden of proof about these regulations usually falls onto the shoulders of the opponents of these regulations, and not their makers, which is just plain dumb. Try arguing with the government, though, and you'll be buried into a pile of bureaucratic nonsense faster than you can say. Well, I tried to think something funny, but look at this subject. Not fucking funny. Moving on. The government has managed to do some very beneficial things, too, like making sure that the medicine we're buying isn't, say, poisonous, or that different businesses can't sell us food that's gone bad 10 years ago and market it as some sort of a superfood or what the fuck happens to be the popular thing at the moment. You get the drill. Although I don't tend to trust big businesses, you know, what I trust even less. A huge government sticking its smelly fingers to private business owners' businesses, and that is why my answer is 2. Government regulation of business usually does more harm than good. Goddamn, this is one long blog post. Next. 1. Homosexuality should be accepted by society. 2. Homosexuality should be discouraged by society. Now, the important question here is, what, or who, is society? Is the question here, should homosexuality be promoted in schools by teachers/outsider businesses? Or is it should people teach their kids about different sexualities? Come on guys, are we talking about government involvement here, once again? Personally, I have nothing against people with different sexual preferences. This would be where I differentiate in a major way from the other right-wing folks, but yeah? No problem here, I mean, it's not like they get to choose who they like, it just is as it is, and I in no way mean or want harm to these people. However, is it beneficial, as a society, to idolize homosexuality? The way I see this, it's great that gays don't have to live in a closet because of fear of being punished for being who they are. It's great that these people can live freely among other people without the fear of getting fired because they are gays. However, I don't think that it's wise to promote it, per se. This is why this question is so layered. No matter how much your everyday raging liberal will want it to be a question of the soul, a black and white thing, if you will. But the LGBT+ movement has grown internationally, and while I vote for people's rights to be with whoever they want, the LGBT movement has simply gone too far. I mean, they are literally holding classes in kindergartens, where they tell the kids that there actually are more than 2 genders, and actually, gender is a spectrum. While I get that they can't stop searching for social justice because they're so ashamed for being white, this is the kind of anti-scientific shit that I don't want them to tell my kids. I mean, this gender thing that they're trying to push has absolutely no validity among scientists. It's a radical alternative claim, not even a theory, that they can provide zero evidence towards. It's just plain feelings and lies. Being gay is perfectly fine by me. But if a homosexual is being a complete asshole, he is just that, and being gay doesn't grant you any extra leeway. This is also where the left has gone wrong. They have made it so that being gay has to be a gay person's biggest achievement, and being gay should be what makes up this person's identity. In my eyes, this is wrong. This is wrong both towards the gay people, and the rest of us. Like being white is seen as a bad place to be in, being straight has become a curse word in some circles. When I was a teenager, some twats had 100% heterosexual written in their IRC and Facebook profiles, like it was something they really achieved, like anyone actually cared. Well, some years go by, and saying you're 100% gay is the coolest thing one can be. I mean, if you're 100% gay, you must be pretty perfect, right? Moving on. Considering the ever-growing flood of immigrants from third-world countries, and considering the ever-declining birth rates of the natives of these Scandinavian countries that the authoritarian EU, and the authoritarian religion of Islam are trying to invade, I'd say no, it's not wise, as a society, to promote being homosexual. Although, I have no idea what that means. Sincerely, I don't care what you're doing in your own bedrooms, and even less, do I care who you marry. If we simply kept everything within reason, the whole LGBT movement would never have become such a bad influence. I mean, if I was gay, I would send some of those guys hate mail for ruining the world for the rest of us. So, without further dodging the question, my answer is 1. Homosexuality should be accepted by society. Finally, considering this last thing I talked about, I have to add that I would never accept the government trying to fuck with people's rights to have an opinion. If someone dislikes gays for whatever reason, let them, who cares? I do me, you do you, and that's essentially what makes a happy society. You can have good relationships with your neighbors, unless you all live in a big house without walls. In that case, the walls will be built, or people will be hurt, and that's a fact. I think that this is enough for now. I will make this a series, because it's simply so much fun. The questions have been great so far, and let's hope that they keep that way. Till next time, stay infidel.